Bob Schramm. I'm the director of the Unruh Institute. And I'm thrilled to see all of you here. When we scheduled this event, we did not know the World Series first game would be occurring at the same time. This is the finale of our Great Divide series in partnership with Annenberg Center for Communication Leadership and Policy and community advocates. And remarkably, we've managed to speak across the Great Divides with a genuine degree of civility. People disagree, but they're not disagreeable. We will return here on Election Day to the Forum on November 7th to watch the results from gubernatorial races in Virginia and New Jersey. Before we start tonight, I'd like to introduce David Lehrer from Community Advocates to say a couple of words.
Thank you, Bob. As a co-sponsor of tonight's event, I'm pleased to welcome you here on behalf of Community Advocates and our chairman, former Mayor Richard Reardon. We think this topic of the entire series, Divided, One Nation, Three Topics, Many Perspectives, has been borne out by the three programs we are having as part of the series. Tonight's topic has been the subject of countless articles and commentary in recent weeks, from Steve Bannon's threats to challenge sitting Republican senators from the right, to California State Senator Kevin De Leon's impending challenge to Senator Feinstein from the left, and even more timely, today's withdrawal of Senator Flake of Arizona from running again to a seat in the Senate. How widespread this phenomenon is, what it portends, and what its impact will be are some of the questions that we'll get into tonight. It's a really distinguished panel and a terrific moderator. So we're pleased that you all came, and we hope you will not have missed too much of the World Series and you will have learned something.
I'm going to introduce the panel quickly and then turn it over to the moderator. To my left, Matt Klink, who's a partner at Sunkin, Klink & Vie, an LA-based lobbying firm. He's worked as a media consultant for Republican candidates and initiative campaigns at the federal, state, and local levels. Kevin Murray, former California State Assemblyman, Democrat, former California State Senator, and chair of the Democratic Caucus. Bill Carrick, Democratic strategist, senior strategist for Dianne Feinstein and Mayor Eric Garcetti. Kimberly Ellis, former executive director of Emerge California, formerly served on the California Democratic Party Finance Committee and just contested the election for California Democratic Party chair. Mickey Kaus, political commentator and author of The End of Equality, former writer and editor for Newsweek when it was a real magazine of great significance, who's blogged for Slate and the Daily Caller, and who now blogs at House Files. House Files. Tonight's moderator is Jessica Yellin, Annenberg CCLP Senior Fellow and former CNN Chief White House Correspondent, and I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, Bob, and thanks to all of you for being here. We're not at the World Series, but we're taking air conditioning. So tonight is a little unusual because I'm used to panels that are divided Democrat on one side and Republican on another, and instead tonight's panel seems to me set up with moderate centrists on one side and the disruptors on the other. Are you guys going to take issue with that?
I was going to say Republican sandwich. But...
A Republican sandwich also. So that gets to the heart of our discussion tonight, which is what is going on inside these parties. And I thought I'd start with Mickey Kaus on one end and ask you, Mickey, the Republican Party is seen as a deeply divided party, even though it's ascendant in America at the moment. Are these divides real, and can you get to the heart of what is at issue in some of the central debates of the party?
Well, I think the divides are very real. In fact, if you look at both parties, it's sort of hard to see how they both stay together. Now, I have people on the panel know much more about politics than I do, so I'll give you my very crude way to look at it, which is Democrats are split left to right. On the left, you have Bernie Sanders. He's for Medicare for all. He's the left on the party is tending toward a universal basic income. On the right, you have the Hillary Clintonites, who Clinton was for welfare reform, probably defend Obamacare, not Medicare for all. There's a divide over whether you go after Wall Street or not. That's a standard left-right divide. The Republicans, though, are split top to bottom. On the top, you have what's called the GOP establishment. GOPE is the horrible shorthand. They're obsessed with low tax rates, controlling entitlements, cutting regulations, They tend to be neoconservative on foreign policy. They believe in an assertive American role. And underneath them, you have the populists who are basically the opposite on all those issues. They're for controlling immigration. They're against totally free trade. They're probably against most foreign adventures that the neoconservatives would be for. So they're completely at war with each other. Of the two parties, the Democrats would seem more coherent because they're, the right wing of the Democrats will just lose and the Bernie Sanders people will win and then that's over. But there's no way you could reconcile Paul Ryan and Steve Bannon. It seems to be impossible. And the final thing I have to say is the great opportunity is if you have the populists at the bottom of the Republican Party and the populists at the left of the Democratic Party, if those two ever got together, it would be a really formidable force that I think would dominate American politics.
Kimberly, I want to put the same question to you. Are the divides in the Democratic Party real? Can you describe what the divide is? And do you see the Bannonites and the Bernie folks ever finding an alliance?
Yeah, well, I think that would be really interesting. I think the fractures and the divides are very real. I think that it's overly simplistic, though, to say that it's between Hillary and Bernie. I think the real question that we need to focus on is what is the party and who makes up the party? When we talk about the parties, are we talking about just those in leadership and those who sort of steer and control the party? Or are we talking about the people who are members of the party and who vote for the candidates from those parties? I think that really is the question, and I think that is what is perpetuating the intra-party divide and the fights that are going on right now. And I think at the end of the day, really what it boils down to is who are the parties there to serve? Are they there to serve the corporate interests, or are they there to serve the people? I most recently ran to be chair of the California Democratic Party, and a hallmark of my campaign was really running to redefine what it meant to be a Democrat. Because there are so many of us who have been members of this party for decades who feel really deeply that the Democratic Party has lost its way, that it has forgotten who it is, what it stands for, and what it's about. And it was about regrounding and rerouting us in being the party of the people that is fighting for everyone. I think that is a conversation that will continue to happen within the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Right now, I think, quite frankly, both parties are fractured, they're in flux, and they're kind of having an identity crisis to figure out who they are and what they want to be.
Bill Carrick, you've been a Democrat, I'm not going to say for a while, but you work with some very prominent Democrats. Who is the leader of your party?
Well, I think that when you're the out party, and we are way out, we don't have a majority in either House of Congress, and we don't have the White House. As a consequence, the out party always has a struggle about who's in charge. I think the Democratic Party is going through a periodic challenge, which is there are new people who want to play a role in our party. And we have to figure out how we're going to absorb these new people in a productive and positive way. Now, sometimes what we have is an establishment that thinks, well, we're in charge, so you people just, particularly you young people in the back, why don't you sit down and shut up? And that problem is real. And it's going to be real, and we're going to have to bring people in and have them participate. There are barriers to that. I mean, we have everything from a presidential nomination process, which has an establishment safety gap, which Bob knows I've been against since I was a child, which is superdelegates. We appoint a bunch of people to be delegates to our convention, and they get to make sure we don't get out of control and do something too far out. And the California Democratic Party has the same process, where elected officials appoint delegates. And the reason Kimberly's not the chairman of the Democratic Party in California now is because the elected officials were almost unanimously giving their automatic delegates slots to her opponent, Mr. Baumann. So, I mean, we're having trouble figuring out, okay, these new people, we like them to vote for us, but now they want to be part of the party. and they want to be part of the governance of the party, and they want to shape our policy. And throughout history, we've had this problem. We go back to assimilation of Irish and Italian Americans in the 19th century, African Americans, from starting with Franklin Roosevelt through all the way through the present day, President Obama. We had Latinos. We were bringing Latinos into our party. When I first started doing California campaigns, 40% of Latinos in California voted Republican. Can you imagine that? There's nothing like that exists now. 187 changed all that. The Latino community found out that the Republican Party didn't have their best interests at heart and started to move to the Democrats and expand their participation in the electoral process. So we periodically go through this process of bringing in new constituencies, making them full partners in our party, and we got to do that now. And it's just a historical reality that this happens periodically.
I'm going to follow up with you on that in a moment. Kevin Murray, you were chair of the Democratic Caucus, member of the state Senate. In your view, Kimberly said, what is this party about? Who do we represent? What does the Democratic Party stand for? Who do they represent?
Well, I think they do represent a bunch of different constituencies. I think generally encompassed by, the downtrodden and the working person. But I think we're talking a lot about party structure when it really comes down to voters. So voters vote for candidates in districts all over the country, and those voters elect certain kinds of people. So, as a former elected, it really comes about your district. So, for instance, if you're a Democrat in the Inland Empire, you have to espouse much more conservative views than someone from Santa Monica. So I don't think there is this universal thing. We have had this big tent thing, as Bill has explained, and so we let all kinds of people in. So you can have the crazy, not crazy, but you can have someone way, way, way out on the left, and you can also have someone on the right. If you're a Democrat running for Congress in Tennessee, you are much more likely to be pro-gun, say, than someone running in a different kind of district. So I don't think you can impose these values. This is almost like the coastal divide. I don't think you can impose these lefty values, which I ascribe to, on every person in the country. The reality is Hillary Clinton got the popular vote by more than 3 million votes. And Donald Trump was president today because blue-collar Democrats in some states in the Midwest voted for him because they came to the conclusion that even though he's a racist, misogynist pig, that he promised them he would try to help them get jobs. Kind of a simplistic view of it, but I think that's what happened. So some of this can't be described by the party infrastructure. It is really about voters on the ground, and they tell you what they like and what they don't like, and they vote you in or they vote you out.
Matt, you've been very patient. We have 2 Republicans and 3 Democrats in the middle, so I'll give you get a little bit of time here. Mickey was saying that the real divide in the party is sort of this establishment force versus some insurgents and a need to change sort of the way the party has, the values the party's embraced for a while. This predates Trump. We all think that this is right now a Trump phenomenon, but we saw it start with the Tea Party. So can you give us a little bit of a sense why that started, where it came from,
Sure.
and where you think it's headed?
Absolutely. I think it had a lot to do with, Charles Kraftheimer wrote an article back in the 90s that talked about, and I wrote it down so that I wouldn't forget it, universal dominion, where America would be much more activist and aggressive overseas and put American values out there, and the rest of the world would fall in line. And then, lo and behold, we went into Iraq to try to establish democracy, and guess what? They didn't want our version of democracy. And then the Wall Street crash happened, and George W. Bush expanded the scope of government, and people were saying, well, wait a second, this is not why I put Republicans in office. and you saw the Tea Party emerge, and everybody thought that that was going to be a reaction because of what the Democrats were doing. It's actually a reaction to what Bush had done. So he unleashed these forces that subsequently were then out of power for 8 years, and 8 years in the wilderness has a great way of figuring that you can probably live under the same roof with someone even though you disagree on almost everything. And they did, and Hillary ran a poor campaign, I'll leave it at that. Not that Donald Trump did anything outstanding, Hillary just ran a really, really bad campaign. And now that they're in office, the Republicans control the House and the Senate and the presidency, they don't agree on much. And therein lies the challenge. So the roots of this, probably 2006-ish, is when it all started, maybe 2005. And I mean, the way I look at it, ultimately, it's to use my Hunger Games analogy. It's U.S. is pennant, and the capital city never loses, right? And everybody else suffers. And where I think Kevin or Bill referred to it as those blue-collar voters, those blue-collar voters determined the election. We went with Obama in 2008 and 2012. Hillary couldn't help them, so they went with Donald Trump in 2016, and voila, there you go.
What you're talking about is an economic issue. So, to some extent, this
On a
is
number of different fronts. It's economic, it's cultural. I mean, I don't think that they don't want Wall Street's version of immigration policy with open borders. They're not for unlimited social spending or for an activist government on a lot of different levels. They want what they want, but they don't want these very activist programs. They're going to throw money at folks.
And for example, today, Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona, a Republican, but considered in this climate a moderate Republican, decided he's not going to run for re-election, and he can't win in this environment. Is that bad news for the future of your party, in your view?
To be determined. I know that's a cop-out, but it depends on who runs for that seat. As we were commenting earlier, Arizona could have 2 new Senate seats up in the near future, but he was going to lose. He was going to get challenged on the right, primarily over the immigration issue. And I just think that he realized that, and unlike a lot of people going down quietly, he wanted to leave no man standing, and he gave Trump the what for and the whereases today.
Mickey, Jeff Flake also wrote a book that was highly critical of Donald Trump, and there is a view that that's part of the reason he had to bow out. Do you think the loss of people like Jeff Flake, moderates who make deals with Democrats, is a problem for the future of the Republican Party?
It's certainly a problem if they get less than a majority in the Senate and the House impeaches the president. Then the president's in real trouble. I'm with Steve Bannon in the party split. I think people like Jeff Flake are a problem. Flake was a special problem on immigration. He was a member of the Gang of Eight that produced this monstrous, comprehensive immigration bill that was going to double the number of immigrants and promise some enforcement later. It was a very bad bargain, and he I think is paying the price for it. So from my point of view, it's an issue-oriented point of view, not a party-oriented point of view. I'm technically a Democrat. I don't care about the future of the Republican Party, but I do care about immigration, and I say a good riddance to Jeff Flake.
You're also a Trump supporter, yes?
I voted for Trump, but it was in California. It's a free vote. I mean, Trump was not going to win California.
So can you give us a sense? You mentioned Steve Bannon and Bannon's vision for the party, and he's opposed a lot of these centrist Republicans. What is he aiming to do, and do you think it is a healthy disruption?
I totally think it's a healthy disruption. He's aiming either to take over the Republican Party or to promote Steve Bannon, and we'll see which is which. Both, but at some point they may diverge. He is the epitome of the populist wing, even if it's not to your liking. He is for immigration control. He's for restricting trade. He tends to be anti-war. He's lobbied against some interventions with Trump, and he also, I think, believes in sort of fairly for a Republican progressive tax and spending policy. He wanted a higher tax rate on the rich. I don't think he's for going after Social Security. So I'm with him on all those things. And if he puts the fear of God into some of these Chamber of Commerce Republicans who really live only to cut taxes and to increase the number of cheap workers in America, I'm all for it.
Let's turn to the Democrats for a moment. Bill, you working with Senator Feinstein on her re-election campaign. You mentioned earlier that there's a challenge in the party, that there's an establishment that's been there a long time and it has to find a way to absorb and incorporate young challengers and people who want to have a voice. Dianne Feinstein, I say this with enormous respect because she is a pioneer in what she's done, and is also 84 years old. And there are people who say anyone, male or female, at that stage should make way for other people to have a role. What is the reason for, should Democrats support somebody continuing at 84 years old, and why not make room for younger people?
Well, it's very simple. She's the top-ranking Democrat on the Judiciary Committee. She has more influence over federal judges, more influence over civil rights, more influence over immigration, more influence over LGBT rights than, and I could go on and on and on, than any other Democrat in the United States Senate. So here's your bargain. You get somebody who's the #1 Democrat in the Judiciary, the top-ranking Democrat on the Intelligence Committee, where as chairperson of the Intelligence Committee, she got rid of torture. And she's a top-ranking Democrat on the Senate Appropriations Committee, trying to make sure California gets its fair share of tax dollars, with the whole country that even without Trump was always trying to say, well, that's California, they don't need all that money. But Trump is at war with us. And as we talk about Steve Bannon's policies on taxes, here's Trump's policy on taxes. Everybody who lives in California, he's going to get rid of your deduction for state and local taxes. Why? Because he wants to tax Democrats across America. That's the whole point of it. New York, California, Massachusetts, New Jersey. He wants to tax the people who voted against him. Now, what's he doing for the people who voted for him? They're getting a hell of a lot of tax breaks. They're getting a hell of a lot of tax breaks. So the Bannon populism is a man outside the party barking at the moon. He has nothing to do with the policy-making agenda of the Republican Party in Washington. Now, what is he doing? Well, we have a nominee, Republican nominee in Alabama with the United States Senate, who may be the most radical right-wing person to ever be nominated by any major political party in the history of the United States. He's the guy that had 10 commandments in the courthouse that he was ordered to take out, and then he was removed from office because he wouldn't take down the statute. And then he told all the probate judges in Alabama who issued marriage licenses that when the Supreme Court ruled that gay marriage was constitutional, he ordered them not to issue licenses to LGBT couples. So that's the guy Steve Bannon got nominated in Alabama. Now, maybe he'll survive, but he has a very good candidate, strong candidate, Doug Jones. He's a U.S. attorney under President Clinton who prosecuted, finally, the Birmingham jail bombers. He's a decent guy, and maybe we get lucky, high African-American turnout, good white Democratic turnout, and maybe we peel off some moderate Republicans. But Bannon is a disaster for them, because he doesn't have a Republican agenda, he only has a Bannon agenda. Now, so I think this campaign, Feinstein and Delio, what is the motivation behind Delio? And I'll tell you what it is. He's a term-limited politician without a job. That's what he is. And he wouldn't be running for this except for this bad idea, term limits. So he's the Senate pro tem, and he's going to be out of office in a year and a half. So he's shopped around looking for jobs, treasurer, governor. He talked about maybe the next time he'd be the run for mayor of LA. He had one of his cronies introduce legislation that would expand the board of supervisors in each county and make a county executive for each county, which would give him yet another job to run for. He started running for lieutenant governor. That's what he's just done in the last year. So this campaign may or may not be a vigorous competitive campaign. I don't know the answer to that. But I think Senator Feinstein is in a place where she can defend California against the Trump administration.
So this is one of the big schisms in the Democratic Party, if you guys aren't aware. Dianne Feinstein, who is one of the stalwarts of the Senate for the Democrats, is now seeing a challenge in this state from within the party. And Kimberly, I'm curious, we just heard Bill Carrick say that really she's such a force of nature, she has so much seniority, that keeping her in the Senate is what's best for Democrats. You disagree?
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree, but let me just say this. As someone who has traveled all across this state, I've been to 50 out of 58 of the counties in California. California does not have a shortage of talent. We have incredibly bright, talented people all across this state. The problem is that the Democratic Party as an institution has done a poor job of recruiting and training and grooming the next generation. They have not done their job when it comes to succession planning. And so we as a party and as an institution have to get better about bringing in and welcoming in the next generation and passing that baton to the next generation. It's actually one of the reasons why Emerge California was started in the first place. So Emerge California is an organization that recruits and trains Democratic women to run for elected office. It was started 15 years ago because the founders went to the national DNC and they went to the California Democratic Party and they said, hey, you know, we found this interesting tidbit of information out. The Republicans have been recruiting and training and running women for the past 20 years. That was around that table when it came time to where we are going to spend that money. That's what made the difference. They didn't turn out the African American vote, they didn't turn out the Latino vote, they didn't turn out the young vote. There are three demographics that are known as the new American majority that have determined the last two elections and will continue determining elections. Single women, people of color, and millennials. Because those groups decided to sit it out, that is why we have who we have in the White House. And then finally, I heard a comment about lefty values and that the Democratic Party has lefty values and those values don't sell in certain parts. Well, I will tell you that my values as a Democrat, I don't consider those to be lefty values. I consider those to be American values. Values that include affordable housing for everybody, that include economic security, a basic income so that people have food, clothing, and shelter. Free college, everybody should be able to attend college. Whole life health care, reproductive justice, environmental stewardship, those to me are not lefty values, they are American values. And because Trump was able to tap into the fear that people had and the frustration and the anger, because he was able to portray himself as someone who would be that fighter for their fears, that is why he won. We on the Democratic side need to have champions who are unapologetic with respect to fighting for our American values, not lefty values, but values that uplift everybody in this country, regardless of your race, your gender, or your background.
Are you running for office? That was impressive. Okay, so Kevin, I want to go back to the Dianne Feinstein case just because it helps explain something that's going on in the party. And there are those, Kevin DeLeon is running because if Bill is saying that it's because he doesn't have a job and he needs something to do, but there is also the argument that he is occupying the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Can you explain, Bill's saying no, can you explain this argument for the audience?
No, he's not representing the progressive wing of the party, but much like Republican politicians and others embracing the Tea Party, he decided that that was the best strategy for him to go after this particular campaign. So he clearly has a history of supporting liberal issues, but I think he's put that on steroids in order to make this race happen. And you hate to be as cynical as he doesn't have a job, but certainly since term limits, which we all, at least most of us here hate, it has caused this kind of thing. And as it relates to Dianne Feinstein, one of the things that we do need doesn't have to necessarily be Senator Feinstein, but we do need people with experience and with capital and influence and with weight. I was elected in the state legislature just after term limits. And by the way, probably would never have run were it not for term limits because a seat opened up. And so when I got elected, there was John Vasconcellos, there was Willie Brown, there were liberal progressive stalwarts who are responsible for many of the achievements that we have in California. And all those people had to go. And since then, the legislature has been somewhat dysfunctional because ironically, everybody is an independent now. There's no structure. There's no grown-ups in the room who actually lead. Everybody, if you're a leader in one of these caucuses, Republican or Democrat, every new person that gets elected thinks that they're that wonderful and they can be leader. And so you have no discipline. Everybody kind of does what they want. And the party, we ascribe a lot of influence and power to the party, which they no longer have. There was a time when elections ran through the party. You wanted the party endorsement, and the party actually controlled a significant portion of the money. But with the rise of super PACs and independent PACs, that influence is less, and it has lessened the influence of the leaders in both the houses and the leaders of the party. So that power struggle between young and old kind of exists in a sense because we created it with term limits. But I do think there is a place for insurgency. No institution can survive without a loyal opposition. You need some internal friction in order to keep yourselves moving. My own belief is that what I'm calling an insurgency, some of you can call it progressive, you can call it whatever you want to do. They tend not to become the majority of the party almost ever. But they play a significant role in moving the policies of the party or the candidates in a particular direction. So all of the issues that Kimberly mentioned are all important issues. The question is whether you make those a litmus test. And the Republicans were very successful doing that with the Contract for America.
1994.
That was Gingrich. Not because they were the great policies, but because they were simple. They were simple things that people could easily understand, and I think some of that is the same with Trump. He made it simple. He just went in to those 3 states in the Midwest and said, I will help you get a job. And those voters, many of them Democrats, were willing to put up with all of these other things in order for the promise to get a job.
Matt, is Trump the future of the Republican Party?
God, I hope not. No, I think that there will always be the outsiders. In this case, he was the one that got onto the inside. I think that the challenge with Donald Trump is that his is a character of, he's such a strong personality that there can't be, unless you find another 100 millionaire or billionaire, I forget, whatever you want to characterize it.
Or a fake one.
Or, well, but what I'm saying is that it's his personality that draws him to that office, and I think that what we'll see, depending upon, right now I would say he's going to get reelected again. You can't beat somebody with nobody. And right now the Democrats don't have anybody, but it's still early. There won't be another Donald Trump that comes along behind. There will be probably someone who tries to restore some type of orthodoxy to the Republican Party again, if the pieces aren't so broken up by Steve Bannon that there is no party to put back together.
Since Trump seems to have no central ideology, what does that mean for the party? Where does the party go from here if he is reelected?
Wow, there's a lot there.
Take out the reelected thing. What does it mean for the Republican Party when you have a president who has no coherent ideology, a leader with no coherent
I think that
ideology?
they have to stand for. They have to be able to say that they cut taxes. It depends, and I think that so long as they can claim that they cut taxes somehow, that a lot of the base will say they did what they're supposed to do. I think that if he can continue to keep the economy rolling, stock market is again up, and I know that's not a good indicator for the folks in the middle, but you combine what the stock market has done with the nice tax cut so people see a little bit more money, with hopefully some movement on immigration, and in a way that I think that the way he handled the Dreamers was smart, because now he can negotiate a compromise, and he's not going to dictate from on high like Barack Obama did, and then he can get something out of it that is a conservative policy on immigration reform to add to what they will likely do with the Dreamers. And I think it's a series of small gains that heading into 2020 that will put him in a good position for re-election.
Nikki, if you listen to the commentariat in Washington, everything Bannon's doing is dangerous and destructive. That part of Trump's administration is very scary for the future, and people like Paul Ryan must prevail for there to be order in this country. Can you paint the opposite picture? In what ways could a Bannon's vision be good for America?
Well, I think if you went to the Republican convention in Cleveland, all these lobbyists were sitting around saying, Trump is going to be okay because we're going to write the bills and pass them and he's just going to sign them, okay? That didn't happen. It didn't happen for a reason, which is the Republican bills do not speak to the coalition that elected Trump. Were the American people clamoring for corporate tax relief? No. Were they clamoring for a more assertive role in the Middle East? No. Were they clamoring for more free trade and a trans-Pacific partnership so that our copyrights could be protected while workers in Indiana were put out of work? No. The Bannon wing speaks to the issues that elected Trump, which is we want to control immigration. You can have a debate how much, how little, but if we have a lot of cheap immigrants, as Cesar Chavez, for one, realized, you can't raise wages because the bosses will just pay people less and less. Similarly, free trade, you're competing against unskilled people all over the world. You have to somehow regulate it. So, and I think the Bannon wing is totally receptive to a lot of good American or Democratic or lefty ideas, like maintaining Social Security, like I even think Medicare for all. I mean, Obamacare is such a mess. At some point, people are just going to say, Medicare works, let's just expand Medicare. It's much simpler, and that's going to happen. So I think what good is the Republican establishment? What is Paul Ryan doing? How many troops does he have? How many people really get up in the morning and say, I want the Paul Ryan agenda of lower taxes? I would say it's less than 10% of the population. And when you're useless, you have a way of losing power.
What you say makes sense, and yet this has crippled government. What is the way forward? How do we see Washington start to work again?
Well, I would say that I agree with the scenario where Trump gets reelected, and at some point he's going to have to show movement on issues. I think you have to do those things that were suggested to get reelected, but at some point you have to show movement on immigration, the economy, health care, or else the voters are going to get increasingly restless. So I hope that, I see Trump as a man with that ideology who has to sort of be controlled with cattle prods, steer him in the right direction, and at some point he will be prodded, I think, into doing something good on health care, and progress will be made. And then at some point he's not president anymore, and then we'll decide which direction to go in.
Is there someone in charge of the cattle prod?
Steve Bannon seems to be in charge of the cattle prod at the moment, but I don't know for how long.
I'm sorry to upset the order, but what about the idea that he has not actually delivered on any of the promises he made? So you have a very optimistic, rosy view, but he actually hasn't delivered anything. Like not just a little bit, not just partial, but literally everything that he was interested in and told voters that he would do, he has not been able to do. How do you survive even among, and it's amazing that his rating stays in the high 80s among Republicans, even though he's not even done what they theoretically have.
He avoided a huge intervention in Syria that was pushed on him by his own national security people. He has lowered the illegal immigration rate dramatically into the United States. So we have a tight labor market where wages are starting to rise. Obama gets a lot of credit, but Trump hasn't screwed that up, and his immigration thing has helped him. I agree, he hasn't delivered on most things, but the night is young. He has 3 more years.
It's been 7 months, 8 months.
You have to acknowledge the inaction in Congress is striking for a first-term president.
But that's not Trump's fault that Congress can't get its act together. that's Congress's fault, because, I mean, why Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan spent 5 months screwing around with healthcare when they've had 7 years to.
And ideas. We had a bipartisan fix. We had John McCain, we had Lisa Murkowski, we had Susan Collins, all vote with the Democrats to kill the Republican idea.
Okay, and then we'll cancel
That's
the
the
illegal
bipartisan
insurance
fix.
payments, and then what happens?
So 20 million more people have health care than you do. That's close to the number. I'm sure it's probably even more than that. So to you, to the Republicans, and to you, that's a failure.
This is the heart of the debate. This is what it's like to live in Washington. This is dinner every night in Washington.
And we're actually friends.
And what's noteworthy is how frustrated you are with the leaders of your own party.
Unquestionably so, absolutely. There is no leader of the Republican Party right now.
And I think that's true among Democrats.
Donald
too.
Trump is
Striking
the,
thing when you control all three branches.
it's not, certainly not, I mean, Donald Trump, he ran and won as a Republican, but again, he is not an ideological Republican. It's certainly not Paul Ryan, it's not Mitch McConnell.
And I don't think he cares about
No,
it.
I don't think he ultimately does either.
So Kimberly, in order to challenge this and defeat Trump, I hear a lot of Democrats say, we have to take a page out of the conservatives' handbook. They did a lot of, they gained a lot by energizing their troops. And the way the Democrats are going to energize their troops is by not being centrist, not going the DLC route, but by being true progressives, embracing somebody like Elizabeth Warren, and getting a real movement to challenge Trump in the future. Is that what you believe?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't like titles or progressive, conservative. Again, when I think about values as a Democrat, I think about American values. These are values that I think most of us share. And just back to the point about why Donald Trump will maybe get reelected, why he is able to continue to keep his ratings somehow above 40%. I think it's the same reason why 90% of Congress continues to get reelected, and that is because of gerrymandering. I think that's an issue that we really need to talk about. I think there was one poll that said that Congress had a 17% approval rating, but yet 90% of them continue to get reelected, and that's because of gerrymandering. I think that's definitely an issue that we need to address in the future. But at the end of the day, what the Democratic Party should stand for, and I think what voters are really looking for, are people who are going to fight on behalf of those values that we all share, making sure that everybody has a job, that has a living wage, making sure that we have an environment that is healthy, making sure that we have health care, making sure that women get the right to choose what to do with their own body. These are issues that I think that are values that we all share. And so until we have that champion, whether you want to categorize them as progressive or conservative or liberal or what have you, I think we're going to continue to sort of be blowing in the wind and searching for the leaders of our parties.
I'd say, as we look back in the last election, Democrats, I think the most profound mistake was we didn't really have an economic message. We were chasing Trump all day and all night, and every spot was about Trump and how horrible he was. How many times do we all see the spot with the kids watching Trump say insane things? I mean, we didn't have an economic message. And I think that is the bridge between single women, millennials, people of color, and white working class people. If you have an economic message, which Barack Obama did twice, you can get all those folks to vote in sufficient numbers to elect somebody. He was right, the small number of votes that we lost the election by because of the electoral college dynamics is unbelievable. And it was I think our ultimate failure not to have a compelling economic message that appealed to a lot of people. We just didn't have it. Now, Trump had an economic message, but it was more of an economic grievance than an actual policy or even a message. It was a grievance. I'm getting screwed, and he knows I'm getting screwed. And that was all it was. Now we get into the White House, and what's the policy? What's the policy? They're writing tax policy with a group from Goldman Sachs, and it all appears to be on 3 pages. And in the 1980s, I worked for Senator Kennedy. Bob and I were there when we did tax reform. It started with ideas from Bill Bradley and Dick Gephardt, and President Reagan latched onto it. And we had a bipartisan bill, we negotiated it, it went on and on and on, for about a year, Bob, 2 years almost. And it was real policy. This is just like talking points. I mean, they masquerading as policy.
Let me bring in some numbers. I'm sorry to be such a TV type person, but according to the latest polling, it shows that Americans, only 49% of registered Democrats approve of the Democratic Party. And the numbers are even worse for the Republicans. In addition to that, an increasing number of Democrats identify as liberal. 48% of Democrats now describe themselves as liberal, not moderate or conservative. That's up 20 points since the year 2000. So Kevin, in your view, do you think that this is a trend in the party that the Democratic leadership has to be attuned to for 2020, or is it simply a momentary reaction to Trump, and you just need any candidate with charisma and an economic message, and that's going to carry the day?
I think it's all of those things. I think I think the party has always been that way, and I think that's about self-identification, and it might be temporary. But you can't just have any candidate. I think part of our problem in the Democratic Party is twofold. One is we don't really have a bench. And so I can't think of anyone, including all of the talented people who are in Congress or governors, that could really step up and run and motivate voters. Because Barack Obama, I think, showed that it was about motivation and motivating young people and people who had not been high propensity voters to actually come out based upon some of the policies and issues that Kimberly mentioned. But you've got to be advocating them, and people have to believe you. You know, one of the things that was wrong with Hillary Clinton is, A, she didn't make these economic arguments, because I still believe that it's the economic argument in those 3 states that had people cross over, and the same thing happened in the Reagan era with the Reagan Democrats. But so you do need, what we don't have is we don't have a natural leader who is ready to step up. There are some who would say Kamala Harris could fit the bill, and I think she's a very talented woman, and that might be very well true. But I think it is as much about leadership. It is as much about leadership and the ability to communicate those democratic values, American values, as it is about whether somebody self-identifies as a liberal or a moderate or a centrist.
And yet, Jessica, the thing we're not talking about, the Republicans control 68 legislative chambers, 31, and the Democrats just 31. 32 states cover 61% of the population. Republicans can hold a constitutional convention right now. They don't even invite the Democrats. So that bench that Kevin just talked about, it's there for the Republican Party. It exists in the states. And I would, by the way, I would love if the Democrats nominate a presidential candidate from Massachusetts, California, or New York. I would love it.
Because?
The Democrats are a strong regional party. Both coasts.
I think he's actually right about that.
He's absolutely right, and I would also add to your point about not being able to find someone. I would suggest that perhaps it's because we're looking in the wrong places. We are looking just in the electoral pool. We're looking at just those who are in elected office. We're not looking in the communities. We're not looking at the activist leaders in the various communities. That's where we need to be looking. That's where you'll find the people who are inspiring. That's where you'll find the people who are change agents, who have their sleeves rolled up, who are in touch and in tune with what's going on with the community and the needs of the constituents. We need to sort of, move outside of the sort of tunnel vision that we have and start looking at in different places.
Great.
How about a young mayor who's done interesting things on the local level?
That'll work, so Derek Garcetti. All right, let's, do we have a few minutes for questions from the audience? How about you guys? What's on your mind? if you put up your hand, I think we got a microphone. Yes, right here.
What are people on both sides saying the solutions are for people who have lost their jobs to free trade? And it seems like Trump's big macro promises aren't working, but it also seems like retraining programs aren't the best. So, is there a new solution out there, or what's the conversation there like?
Mickey, you want to handle it from the...
That's such a good question. We have no good answer so far. The economist's answer is, well, let's have the free trade. The people are out of work. We'll subsidize their adjustment and different trade. That never works. It hasn't worked. We do it very badly. So Trump's basic approach is, let's not get to that point. Let's keep the jobs here and not send them away. That's the first thing. The second thing is you should have pivoted to the center and started a big infrastructure project, which would put a lot of people to work. And also, as the last, the big debate is, do you just give people cash, the universal basic income, or do you give them a job? I've always been in the job camp, and that inevitably leads you to want something like the old WPA, a guaranteed jobs plan, where it's not a very good job, but it's a floor, and there's always a job there for you if you need it, and it does useful things. That's not a complete solution. Ultimately, we're facing the dilemma that people who don't have skills just can't make much money in today's economy. They used to be able to make $20 an hour, now they make $8, $10. And we're going to have to subsidize them and do the best we can.
Well, I think one of the things that we have done in this country is systematically minimize the labor movement. What we've done in this country in the last 50 years is minimize the importance of the labor movement. And you can see, particularly in unions like the carpenters, who are doing job training themselves now, that are very thoughtful and very forward-looking. Basically, the number of people who belong to the labor unions now is at a historic low, and that has created a lot of downward pressure upon salaries because there's nobody collectively bargaining. The job training has got real promise for particularly those people who are going to be in transitional situations. Now, what Trump does is he basically lies to people about a lot of this stuff, like he's going to get rid of NAFTA, which we know is not true, or we're going to bring back the coal industry, which we know is not true. So, I mean, there's a lot of that is going to come back and bite him because it's just phony. But we Democrats have to have, again, we have to have a strong and economic message that works on many fronts. Trade is a tough issue. Trade is a tough issue. It does. Here in LA, we do very well with trade. We have two big ports, Long Beach and LA, which are actually one. We have Oakland. We have a lot of things going on in the state that are very much helped by trade. But that's not true of all the country, and we got to figure out how to deal with it. And I agree with Mickey that some of these ideas that have been traditionally tossed around just haven't really worked that well.
Well, the thing about free trade is it's a double-edged sword. So if you do protectionism and you add tariffs, you maybe bring back some manufacturing to the country. But there's also a lot of jobs that get lost that are dependent upon selling products overseas. So free trade is one of those things where you impose tariffs, somebody imposes tariffs on you, and I don't know that you end up with a wash, but you don't necessarily end up with the benefit that you wanted. I think infrastructure spending, which the number of roads and bridges that this country needs repaired is very significant, and so you can make a great case that has been that would work as a stimulus. It has worked in the past. I hate to even admit that President Trump proposed doing that, but some of his colleagues in the Congress are against any kind of additional spending.
Well,
but that would be a great investment.
The new solution to the infrastructure problem, he hasn't fully abandoned. He now has an idea of we're going to privatize infrastructure, take it out of the public sector, and the government will, after you privatize the infrastructure development, then the federal government will pay for 15% of the project. Which, if we take that, I got a bridge in Brooklyn. I'd like to tell everybody in this room.
Well, we've done that. We've done that here before in California. I was actually chairing the transportation committee committee at one point, and we did these toll roads, these public-private partnerships, and the overwhelming majority of them went out of business, such that the government had to bail out the private contractor.
Anyone else have another question? Here, yes. On this. Will you hang on for the mic? There you go.
Hi. So you talked about the economic message that Hillary Clinton should have run on, but it seems, and I've heard that argument a lot, but it seems more likely to me that the kind of political establishment or elite are desperately trying to search for a reason why people voted for Trump, somebody as racist and sexist as him, and they that's like more savory answer, which is this economic reason. And instead of the fact that the more obvious appeal to Trump seemed to be that he spoke to this lack of, or this white people in the middle of the country losing cultural power. And how do you think that, what do you think of that? And also, how do you think that both parties can reconcile this or appeal to these people without becoming as racist or sexist as Trump?
Well, I think there's no question that Trump, and he continues to do it, what's going on with this incredibly horrible thing about the soldier who got killed in Niger. I mean, he's got more dog whistles than anybody in the history of the presidency. And that just continues, and it's bad for the country. The first thing we can do to heal the country and bring people back together is to get rid of him. That would be really important, because the coarseness, the viciousness of his daily Twitter conversation, which is, we think of him sitting in, early in the morning, some mad Twitter guy just sending out vitriolic messages. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think we have to, we as Democrats, Kimberly talks about going to 50 out of 58 counties. We as Democrats got to talk to people everywhere. I mean, we have a fixation with analytics at the professional level of the Democratic Party. And that tells us, don't go there, there's no votes. Don't go there, there's no votes. And we end up in this little narrow thing where we got to carry Pennsylvania, got to have Michigan, got to have Wisconsin, or we can't win. We have to have a broader sense of mission about our presidential campaigns, because we keep reducing it to smaller and smaller constituencies, and it just doesn't work. And we have to expand the Democratic reach into other parts of the country.
Could I also suggest getting rid of Trump is the short-term solution? The longer-term solution is to do one of the things that we talked about during my campaigning, and that is having the courage to facilitate difficult conversations and tell hard truths. And the hard truth of the matter is that this is a country that is full of racists and sexist, and they exist also in both of the parties. I personally experienced in-your-face racism and sexism, not from Trump supporters, but from people who describe themselves as progressive liberals in California. And so I think at the heart of your question is, we have to be able to take a long look in the mirror and to acknowledge what's looking back at us. The fact that we still have these problems is because we as a country are not willing and able, we don't have the courage to have the conversations about the racism and the sexism, the xenophobia, the homophobia that exists in this country. And until we're able to have those conversations, we'll continue to have these problems.
Donald Trump won in part because he captured the mood of America in 2016 was angry. It's not what you read in the New York Times or the LA Times or the Washington Post. It's what you read in the Indianapolis Star and the Omaha Herald and places like that. They were angry and they were pissed off after 8 years of Barack Obama. And Hillary Clinton came out and tried to say, yeah, things are pretty good, I'm going to change a little bit. People didn't want a little bit of change. Donald Trump could not have run this campaign if he had run in 2008 following George W. Bush. He was a man of the moment, and he capitalized on an opportunity, and I don't think he had any genius strategy, because he did everything that people who run campaigns professionally would have said don't do. but his timing was right for this. And the challenge now, he's not going to be able to run the campaign he ran in 16 and 20. And can he adapt and can he be flexible enough? That's the big question mark. With the flip side of that being, can the Democrats nominate somebody who has that compelling vision?
I think your point is well taken. One of the things Donald Trump did is he made it okay to be racist and made it okay to be racist out in public. And part of that anger was fueled by the irrational opposition to Barack Obama when he first got elected, which at the end of the day, you can argue with him on certain policies, but the hate and vitriol against Barack Obama had to be fueled by racism. And so after 8 years of people saying undercover things which turn out to be racist, he jumped on this thing that made it okay for those people to be racist. And I think you're absolutely right. We do not talk about the cultural divide that there is enough. Anybody who watches Bill Maher, you can see, every week he'd say to people, don't you really believe that it's racist? And people would always politely say, no, we disagree with Barack Obama's policies. But you could disagree with the idea of universal health care, or you can disagree with the method. But for 8 years, he wasn't born here. Just absolute lies about him. So all of that, the Republicans jumped on that racism during his first campaign and throughout that 8 years and stoked up that anger. And then Donald Trump made it okay to admit to it. So
if you look at the key, I recommend that the writings of Tom Edsall in the New York Times, who certainly believes that racism is a huge factor, that's his sort of main obsession, but he notes if you look at the key precincts in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, the white Reagan Democrats who swung the election voted for Obama twice.
Right.
And then they voted for Trump. So how racist are they if they voted for Obama twice? Now you could say they felt, well, I voted for Obama, so I couldn't be a racist, so now I can be a racist. But in fact, they did vote for Obama twice.
Well, there's that, but the main factor is not so much that they were racist, but that they were willing to allow racism in order to meet their own economic needs. So again, guy who, virtually, who allows support in relationship with white supremacists and Ku Klux Klan, in past years, that would have been a death knell. Like, you just can't do that. But these people said, well, if he's gonna fix this either trade problem or I'm gonna get a job, then I don't care that he's a misogynist or a racist or that he allows misogyny or racism. So I still think that played a big factor, and I very much agree with you and with Kimberly that we are maybe too afraid to openly discuss all of these things. Although I also think I don't know that I'm going to change some racist mind by having a discussion.
He's supporting a racist right now for the U.S. Senate.
Right.
Roy Moore is a white supremacist. It's going on right now.
Jeff Sessions.
Jeff Sessions is as good as you get. That's it.
Is there we have time for one more question. Yes, in the green?
Two people in the green.
Oh, sorry. Young woman with a braid? Here we go.
Hi, my name is Carrie. Thank you so much for coming. This is super interesting. So I kind of wanted to ask about what you would think the future of political parties are. As you mentioned before, there seems to be a divide of people kind of not leaning towards like the polarized, like liberal, conservative, Democratic, or Republican. And I read in a few articles that the future of politics is there will be several parties aligned and running and kind of establishing themselves in American politics, and kind of wanted to see if you had any opinions or predictions on that topic.
I don't think the parties are going to be relevant. I think they are not needed to fund the campaigns anymore. I think the party platform in each of the parties has no binding effect on the people who have gotten elected under that party. As I said, the finance rules, the electoral rules They all run either through these outside PACs. You have Koch on the Republican side, you have George Soros and some others on the Democratic side who are big financiers. There are super PACs of all types on both sides. So the parties, Reince Priebus was the chief of staff, and then he became irrelevant. He wasn't relevant during the campaign, and he certainly wasn't relevant as chief of staff. There were all these other people. So I think that they will begin to have less and less relevance and be just kind of an ideological touchstone, not necessarily a driving force.
Let me just say one thing about that. 90% of Republicans voted for Donald Trump, 89% of Democrats voted for Hillary Clinton. So that, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, means a whole hell of a lot to a hell of a lot of people. Now, we do have a growth in independent voters, but in California, PPIC does quarterly polls about the political partisan, how they lean, how the independent voters lean, Democratic or Republican. 2-1 in California, they lean Democratic. Now, you can pick whatever state you want. South Carolina, they lean 2-1 Republican. So their parties do have relevancy, and they are a very important consideration in how voters cast ballots.
But not the organization and the infrastructure.
Well, that's the organization and the infrastructure's fault.
Right, I would agree with you, and probably so would people.
Well, what I'll say is this. No party preference, decline to state, and independent registration is outpacing Democratic registration by 4-1. 4-1. That's not just a trend here in California, it's a trend that's going on nationally. More people are choosing to not associate with either party because they have lost trust in both of the institutions, quite frankly. And so unless there is a deep course correction within the Democratic Party and quite frankly within the Republican Party, I think they are quickly heading towards being irrelevant.
But they will continue to be cues on how people can consider candidates, considering that most people don't pay attention until right before they vote.
And most people don't pay attention at all. So, the reality is most people just don't have the time to sit around discussing this stuff like we do and aren't interested. They're busy trying to feed their families.
Or watching
And so, to Bill's point, the party designation becomes a touchstone. But, do any of you know what the Democratic or Republican platform is? And you guys are political science students, some of you. So nobody pays attention to any of that. But like you said, it's a touchstone for people to follow when making a choice.
All right. Thank you all so much for a lively discussion.
Thank you, Jessica, for a great job moderating. David, once again, thank you for community partners, and thanks to CCLP. We'll see you back here on November 7th. Now, I know you may not care that much about New Jersey and Virginia. Let me tell you, those are going to be very important bellwethers of what's going to happen in the midterm election in 2018 and how people are reacting to Trump. Thanks, everybody. Great night. Dodgers are ahead 3-1.